So we're called to pray for the city and to seek the peace of the city. Well, how do we do that? First of all, I'm hoping that those two things, being a resident alien and seeking the shalom of the city, are not too disturbing to you. Does anybody come from a faith tradition where you would say, I really don't want to seek the peace of the city? Maybe not. I think it's something that can unify. Well, let me give you what I think are the two roles of the institutional church. The two roles for believers that I think can actually bring unity to the church, particularly when it comes to the different factions, both in the emerging and then the traditional church. The first thing is, and I learned this from Abraham Kuyper. I was reading a lengthy kind of summary biography on his thinking, and I realized that he had struggled with this both as a pastor and as a prime minister. And what is the role of a believer? And how can this, and I think this can help us transcend the differences, even in denominations and different faith traditions. The first thing he said is that we're all members of the institutional church. Now, you can call it an organic church, you can call it a liquid church, you can call it the total church, you could call it the deep church. You can say we're not into the institutional side. Regardless of how we say it, as soon as you join a body of believers, you're part of some sort of an institution, even if it's 5 people and you want to call it organic. As soon as you schedule your first meeting somewhere and put a date and time on it, I'm sorry, but you just joined the institutional church. So as fluid as you think you are. So when I first planted Redeemer, I thought we were going to be really fluid and organic, and we were going to do that. And then after the first time we scheduled a meeting and we decided we needed to change it, I canceled it. And I thought that was really fluid. And someone in their 50s was really ticked off because they had planned their whole weekend around this meeting, and then I just messed it up. And then I realized, you know what? Sometimes being fluid is not loving. Sometimes to keep to your schedule is actually a good thing, But we're called to the institutional church, and that just means we're called to the body of believers. That's all that means. We're called to be part of the body of believers, support the work of the ministry, to be involved in the church. And the church is called to disciple, public worship, evangelism, training. We're called to all of those things. It's all the things as pastors you're trying to figure out how to do. Community, small groups, counseling. That's what we're called to do, to preach the gospel and see how it then transforms and trains believers. We're all called to that. Now, again, is there anybody in the Anabaptist tradition that would find fault with that? Are there any Presbyterians that would find fault with that? Any Baptists, Pentecostals? All right, so we're finding some unity. We may have some slightly different theology, but for the most part, we think that this is what the body of believers should do. Whether it's a big church, a small church, whether it's more organic, whether it's a house church, So we're all right. Good. I'm glad there's some unity. But what about the outside world then? What about the culture? This is where Kuyper says, but the church is also organic. The church isn't just about meeting together and being the family of God and then training one another and witnessing to the outside world that we actually love one another and forgive one another. It's also organic. What does that mean? Well, it just means that at some point during the week, the church scatters. Our church scatters. I mean, we go kind of in separate ways. I mean, I think we'd love to hang out and stay together. Does anybody live as a church? Do you guys live on a compound together? No, neither do we. I think that might actually be kind of cool. I mean, it doesn't always have to be kind of cultish and kind of weird, but it would be kind of cool to always be together all the time. I mean, I'm down with that. I mean, I love the people in my church and to be able to hang out, but that's not the way it works in our culture. We're scattered. We're sent out. So the end of our worship service, we literally the part of the blessing and benediction is we're sending people out with God's blessing to go serve. That's the organic church. What do we do when we're away from the body of believers during the week? Well, we live out our Christianity, right? We do that. Well, how do we do that? What does that look like? There's the dividing line oftentimes. There are those who say, well, you go out into the world and you make enough money so that you can give more to the church, but other than that, your job is secular. It doesn't have anything to do with God. But as I learned all the way back from the Kuyper quote, everything has to do with God, every aspect of our life. When Jesus says he's come to give life and give it abundantly, does he just mean what we do on Sunday? Or does he mean all areas of life? I think he means all areas of life. Well, if all areas of life are important, then it changes the way that we have to live. Well, how do we live differently when we're the organic church out there? And how do we train people? See, at this point, I haven't said anything about politics. I haven't said anything about pacifism or just war. Those may be part of it. We may have to have those dialogues. We may have to divide on those. I mean, there's going to come a point where I'm a just war guy. I'm not going to be able to go where my pacifist brothers and sisters go. We're going to have to continue to dialogue and think through those things. But why do we let those things completely divide us in the church instead of saying, where's the commonalities? Do we have a lot in common culturally where we can move forward together and seek the peace of the city, where we don't have to worry right at this moment about partisan politics, or we don't have to worry about what we think about nuclear arms? But we let those things divide us instead of saying, let's join together across denominational lines and let's agree that we're supposed to be the church together and that we're also supposed to seek the peace of the city. And so many of those things can be done without being partisan. Do you believe that? You know, is anybody here involved or know people involved in local politics? I've got a number of people in my church who are involved in local politics, and I always ask them, how do you work across party lines to get things done in local politics? You know what they tell me? They said local politics is usually unbelievably unpartisan once you get past the election. It's not about partisan politics like it is in Washington. On the local level, it's really just getting things done for the schools, getting things done for the city. Very few disagreements take place on a partisan Democrat versus Republican level, at least in the cities around Orange County. They may differ on how much money they want to spend for this or that program, but there's a huge ground for people to get along. And I think it's the same thing in the church. There's huge areas where we can agree on what it means to be the organic church together and seek the peace of the city right in our neighborhoods and in the cities that we live.